Welcome to the Wrestling with Success podcast. In this show, you'll learn how to use lessons used in sports so you can use failure as your secret weapon for success and succeed in the real world. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, husband, father, adventure seeker, and entrepreneur, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Success. Today's guest is absolutely unbelievable. I never realized until I met him that certain things could be accomplished by human beings. I thought the Ironman and ultra marathons and becoming a Navy SEAL, I thought those things were just the maximum limit of human endurance. And, you know, this puts human endurance, this guest puts human endurance to just at a whole different level. So I think you're going to really enjoy this. But more importantly, he shares specific details on how he accomplishes huge goals. And he's got some huge goals, and he's accomplished a lot of these massive goals in his life. And he's got some other really big ones that he's got in the works right now. So I think you're going to love this guest and love some of the details that he shares. And I think one of the things you're going to ask yourself is when you're listening to him talk about how he documents his goals and the tips and tactics that he uses for actually achieving and following through on these goals, I think you're going to ask yourself, like, who does this, right? Who does these things that are so extreme? And then you're going to have to answer it by saying, well, really successful people do. So it's really powerful. I know you're going to love this. I feel like I could probably charge about $100 or probably $1,000 for this episode because it's just so powerful. I think you're going to get that much value out of it. Real quick before we bring on the guest, Reveal Your Path launched it last week. Thank you for all those who endured all the launch emails. I put out a bunch of emails last week promoting the program. Bunch of people signed up. I've now got we've got an MBA in the program. We've got a neurosurgeon in the program. We've got an NCAA finalist in the program, and that's in addition to the folks who have been in it before, professional athletes, head college coaches, etc. So another amazing group. I would love to hear from you. If you haven't signed up for Reveal Your Path, what would be the ideal solution for you? If you were one of the people you're on my email list and you've got a bunch of those emails, if you have thoughts or feedback on what exactly would be the ideal solution for you, love to hear it. We've got a great program, got great testimonials, want to continue to make it even better and make it available to more people. So shoot me an email at jim@jimharshawjr.com. It's jim@jimharshawjr.com. Now for today's show. Welcome to episode 47 of Wrestling with Success. Today I bring you Wayne Kurtz. Wayne is a speaker, author, coach, and an athlete. He's a man of tremendous passion who has spent a lifetime devoted to pursuing and achieving every goal that he has set out to accomplish. Growing up, he learned from his parents to set big goals and to work hard to achieve them, and he followed that advice. He's completed some of the most difficult races ever endured by a human being, and he's going to share some of that with us and some of the mental game that it takes to achieve not just big goals, but the biggest of goals that you can possibly set for yourself. Wayne, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, you are in my hometown of Pittsburgh, so go Steelers, go Pens, go Pirates.
You got it, exactly. Live and die, right?
That's right. It's in the blood. So, Wayne, you and I got introduced by another one of my guests, Ken Lubin, and Ken told me, just as a few episodes back, Ken told me about you and some of the crazy things that you've done. And before we get into your coaching and speaking and sort of some of the things that you do now, tell me, well, you're doing some of these races now, tell me about the story and tell the listener about what you told me about how you kind of got into doing triathlons and then how that progressed into some of the, the insane things that you've done.
Sure. I guess everyone who has ever competed in sports through college, there's a hole that comes up, and as a wrestler, when it ends, right? And you're done and it's over. And I swam competitively. I played baseball all the way from a little kid all the way up into college. And long story short, the year that I graduated, I guess it was the year I guess it was my sophomore year. in college. I came back to Pittsburgh, was working over the summer, earned money for the fraternity and everything else. And I saw a little entry form. This is back in the mid 80s for a triathlon. Now, back at that time, Jim, I mean, there really weren't many triathlons. I mean, especially in Western Pennsylvania. Would have been one thing on the West Coast in California where it was founded. But saw this little thing for a triathlon in the county park that I used to train in a little bit for swimming, and kind of threw this out and thought, I wonder how hard this could be to give this a try. And, in the swimming, you get kind of burnt out of it. And that kind of started with, okay, I got to get a bike, which means I need to go do some work, make some money to buy a $300 bike back at that time, which was a lot of money. And at that time, I remember telling my mother specifically these words: well, once you get the bike, there really isn't a whole lot more expense. It's just running shoes and some things. And there were no products. We didn't have Aero and all the high tech. It was old school. And looking back on that, how much money I've spent over the last 31 years, it's been a lot, but I would do it 10 times over, because the journey of doing triathlon started in Pittsburgh, and I have raced around the world. And it was the passion of trying something new that combined one sport that I did know, which was swimming, and then this craziness of then following it up with a bike and run. And back then, as I said, there were 2 races in Pittsburgh. That was it. And there were very, very few. So finished the first one, and it became a lifetime journey and passion that's kind of grown, and it's helped more than just sports. It's been a great crossover in all my businesses that I own from that side as well. So that was the start of it.
And you started and you found an Ironman, and then you told me you found a double Ironman. And tell me about that progression up to the Triple DECA.
Yeah.
And explain what a Triple DECA is once you go through that. So start out with the double Ironman and on up.
All right. So the first race was not an Ironman. Back then there was only one. The only one they had back in the 80s was the Hawaii Ironman. So it was a sprint distance was the first one. And I had done, I think, a 5K. I wasn't a runner. So I had done a 5K, and I just kind of progressed. It's kind of the typical curve back in that time is you do some running, do the 5K. There were no half marathons. You jump to a marathon. You build up for that. You do some triathlons, and then this world of ultra racing came into existence in the 1990s, early 1990s. And I remember vividly, I was doing a race in Somerset, Pennsylvania. It was a little sprint triathlon, and I saw a guy come up, and we were chatting. It was an older fellow, and he said to me, I'm here from out of state, on and on. We were chatting, and he had a shirt on that listed this Huntsville, Alabama double Ironman. And and of course I'd heard of the Ironman, and I thought, what is this? So that kind of triggered my thought of, okay, I got to attempt an Ironman. And I tried my first Ironman, which was in New Hampshire. And back at that time, there were a handful of Ironmans, not just Hawaii, and got through that hurdle. And I always had in the back of my mind, I remember seeing that shirt, and I thought, God, this double Ironman thing is fascinating. So what it is the typical Ironman is your 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, then a marathon, 26.2 mile run is your typical Ironman. But then there's this whole world of ultra distance triathlons beyond that. And the double Ironman, which was founded here in the U.S. in Huntsville, now has moved, and we've got multiple ones in the U.S., consists of just doubling the distance. So it's a 4.8 mile swim, 224 mile bike, and then a 52 mile run. So this takes, roughly, anywhere from 24 to 36 hours is the maximum amount of time that you can take in the double Ironman. So you're going through the night in these circuit little courses. So you're doing loop after loop. So the swim is usually in a lake or a pool, and then the bike, on like a typical Ironman or triathlon race, is short circuit. So it's like a 6 mile loop. You keep going around in circles. And then the run is usually 1 mile out, 1 mile back. And it's mainly to alleviate loads of aid stations, just, shutting down roads and traffic and everything else. So they're in a closed-in venue. And the first one I had done is where our, the original now has been moved to Virginia. And then that just started in a whole launch of everything imaginable. So did the World Championships up in Canada, and then just started racing these ultra triathlons, mainly in Europe, because we only had one for a long period of time. Now we have 3. We've got one in Oregon, one in Florida, and one in Virginia. And then they just keep progressing, Jim. So you got the double Ironman,
right,
and you got the triple Ironman. All right. So then in that you get to, I think it's 60 hours to do the triple. So you just add another Ironman on the distance, and then you get to the quintuple. And that was a big move for me when I moved to the quintuple in Mexico. And a lot of the big, long races have all been housed in Mexico, in Monterrey and in Leon, Mexico for, I don't know, since 1992, I think was the first one. And that was my first experience of really going way over the edge in terms of, the quintuple Ironman was it like 12-mile swim in a pool, 500 and some mile bike, and then you had to run 131 miles. So this is a long
That's absurd.
one. Yeah. And unlike, not unlike, but very similar to the Ironman space, and they don't call these Ironmans because it's a trademark name and the whole conglomerate around Ironman. They're just called ultra distance triathlons or different versions of the word ultra. The signature race, like the Hawaii Ironman World Championship in the ultra triathlon space, is the DECA Ironman, or the DECA Iron. And that is 10. So you're doing 10 of these, and there's two different options. And not to get into so much detail, but in Mexico, every other year for years, and I remember seeing these in magazines, and it was kind of that dream. You saw it in Triathlete magazine, this absolutely insane race where people are doing 10 Ironmans in a row. And the numbers are kind of staggering when you first think of it. It's like, my God, I could never do something like this. It's like 24-mile swim in a pool.
Yeah,
Bike
in a pool, no less, which is
miles,
how many laps?
262 miles. So you're swimming for 12 to 15 hours in a pool.
Goodness.
You're biking for days, and then you're running for days. So they have a continuous version. You got to sleep in between, but it is a race, and which is something I think you probably know as being a wrestler. There is a competitive spirit in this, and the people have come from all over the world. Lots of Europeans and Americans,
sure,
Asian as well.
A lot of camaraderie, I imagine.
Big time. Prior to the race, we have such a good time. It's a family atmosphere. But come race time, I mean, it becomes kind of that mental war of just being able to press on, playing the sleep game, how far you can go sleep deprived, watching the competitors, the leaderboard. So they have the continuous version. Then every other year they have the one per day. So you do one Ironman per day for 10 straight days.
Jeez.
And it's interesting. People always say, what's harder, Wayne? And I've done a lot of these. I've done 4 of them. And the one per day Ironman seems like that would be easier, right? I get to sleep. But when you add in all the time in preparation to get ready every morning to do all 3 events,
yeah,
it's harder. It is significantly, and the dropout rates are higher. Usually it's less than 50%, or around 50% finish in the one per day DECA, and probably about 60 to 70% of the starters finish in the continuous DECA.
Okay, interesting.
Okay. So that's a lot of numbers for you there. So that's kind of the progression, and as I said, it's been a great journey, and hopefully I can do it for another 30 years. We'll see.
Yeah, and then the triple DECA.
Well, this one, I'll give you the little story around this one.
And this is the one I've since you and I have spoken in the past about this, I've told a handful of people. I don't think they believe me when I tell them that somebody actually did this. So share that with the listener.
Right. So we were doing the DECA race, so the one per day, 10-day Ironman race called the DECA Ultra Triathlon in Sicily back in 2000. I think it was 2011 was the race. And they didn't have it in Mexico that year. So we were doing it over in Sicily and Italy. And after the race, we were having, the post-race party and the drinking the vino and everything else. And one of the gentlemen who was the race director stood up and cheered his glass to everyone. And he said to the group of us that finished, "What's the limit?" And everyone was just, what do you mean, what's the limit? Is it possible to do 30 Ironmans in 30 days in a race format, sanctioned, timed, not just a personal journey, but an all-out race? And everyone just laughed. I mean, you can imagine when you hear, no, yeah, this is crazy. Well, of course, in 3 months, we get an email from the race director. hey, if any of you interested in something like this, this is something we might consider. We have a venue we think it might work in Italy. So long story short, of course, I've got to try to think of how I'm going to sell my wife on this to be like
sure.
racing for a month. Can you imagine? Let alone work, clients, and everything else.
Yeah.
It came together in the next year of planning, and then in 2013, September of 2013, the race started in Lake Garda, Italy, so a different location. It was a world record race, first time anything ever been held like that, and we did an Ironman a day for 30 straight days in Lake Garda. And of course, I wrote the book about what happened in the event, but I was one of the 8 that finished it. It was, it was one of those lifetime things. It was an amazing journey, to say the least. And it was, kind of over. It was beyond. But one thing I think it's like the Tour de France, and even maybe in different sports, it's amazing when you do the same thing over and over again for 15 hours a day, how physically fit you get, even though the body's breaking down. We actually got faster as we went through the race.
No
Those
kidding.
that lasted. Okay.
Jeez.
We started with about 20, I think it was 22 started and 8 finished. So yeah, that was 2013.
And for the listener, I want you to understand, like, I prompted Wayne with this question, with the first question I asked, and he doesn't want to, he's not trying to brag about this. He's not trying to tell the whole world. Like, I asked him with the first question, then he kind of talked. Then I said, well, tell us about, the Ironmans and the DECA. And then he kind of pulled that out of him. And I had to pull out of him that he actually completed this thing. I mean, this is beyond what I thought was humanly possible. And Wayne, it's just insane that you, when you told me this, I was floored. And then you sent me some videos and I checked some of those out. And it was just unbelievable that a human being can actually endure what you've endured. I was a wrestler. I'm biased. I think it's a pretty tough sport.
Yeah.
Some people ask me why. Why do you go through everything it takes to be successful at wrestling? Because, at the national championships, you get, 15, 20,000 people. There's 19,000 people in Madison Square Garden a month ago for the national championships. But outside of that, it's not a football or basketball. You're not getting the crazy media attention and the glory. And people ask me why, why did you put yourself through some of the unbelievable things you had to go through just to compete, just to be on the team, let alone make the starting lineup, let alone become an All-American. And I have my own answer. I have my own whys. I'm sure you hear that question, right? Mm-hmm. How do you answer that question, Wayne?
Well, I guess there's probably a couple points to it. I think it's personality, and very similar to you and individuals that are drivers. When you have kind of that type A personality, there is that mindset of, I wonder how far I could actually go. And it's not physical. It is. I mean, it is physical, but when we did surveys of the athletes that finished the race in Italy, and what I kind of guesstimated was true. It was about 65% we thought was mental and 35% physical. And I think that's the attraction of why I do it. And I think the other athletes, forget about me, but other athletes, and when I ask them, it's the same thing. It's saying, how far can I get into the brain of being able to keep continuously moving for periods of time in a sport that we love? And I do. I absolutely love it. I'm passionate about triathlons. It was life-changing when I first started it, because the why is, can I push through it? And then the crossover is, I've got a client situation in one of my businesses that's blowing up, or we're trying to do something new with the business. If I can get through this, I can usually say somehow, some way we can figure out a way to outwork or outthink a way to make it happen. And it crosses right over into business. It crosses over into family. And it also helps because I mentor our godchildren. I do a lot with my nonprofit. So there's spin-offs. So the idea of doing it, there is that personal challenge of racing. I love to race. I love to compete, just like you like to wrestle. I mean, no different, right? It is on the line, go for broke over a long period of time, and really see how much you can personally suffer in your brain, because it's mental.
Sure.
I think that's the big why. And then those crossovers, every time I've done one, when you come out on the other side of these things, and I've gone in like most of the individuals that do them, not finishing is not an option. It's a thing that I have used again and again. And it's like business, it's in life, it's family, it's whatever else. Somehow we got to make it happen. So that was probably the long-winded answer to it. But, I think the big driver of it is I just love doing the sport. It's just something I've just loved to do.
Yeah, through the pain and suffering that you go through sports and through training in sports, and we've all been, for every listener that's an athlete, I think just about every listener is an athlete or has been an athlete. We've all done the suicides and the sprints, and where you're thrown up over a barrel and you can't feel like you have nothing left, and you discover yourself. You really discover yourself in those moments. You are more real, and you are more the real, true, primal you in those moments. You really find out who you are more in those moments than in any other time, I think, in that pain and suffering. What are you thinking, and what's going through your mind at that point? And are you able to control your thoughts and the words that you're saying to yourself and out loud in those moments of severe pain and suffering? Can you've set massive goals? I mean, massive. I mean, just to attempt a triple deca, let alone complete it. Just forget about completing it even. You set huge goals, not mediocre, not pretty big. I mean, you have this 01 challenge that you're working on, which for the listener, I can include a link to the 01 challenge in the show notes. But this is a race that Ken is setting, that Wayne is setting up, that is $250,000 entry fee. It's a worldwide race. This thing is huge. Wayne, you've talked about in your bio that I read earlier, you said you've set huge goals. You've achieved every goal that you've set. Tell us about the goal setting process. Tell us about how one goes about achieving massive goals. Because every listener, everybody here, everybody listening to this show, including myself, we've set goals. We've achieved some. We've failed other times. How do we break through and achieve massive goals?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jim. I mean, I guess I could probably break it down a little bit. The way I do it, I don't suggest everyone has to do it the same way. And it's been driven off of from how I grew up with my mom used to tell me, when you're swimming, write down your goals. What do you need to do the 50? There wasn't even meters back then. It was yards, right? What's your time for the 50-yard backstroke? What's the time you want to achieve for this? And it was those kinds of things. And also we broke it down a little bit. My mother was a big, my mother and dad, big drivers of making sure you're well read. Okay. Read a lot of stuff, research, overwork. So goal setting always kind of started from them. And I kind of incorporated the original learning lessons on how I do it. And what I do is I still physically write down my goals, and I write them down with deadline dates. Nothing that's rocket science, but unlike I do a few things that make me not forget them. One is I don't put it on a sheet of paper. I've kept a journal for the last 10 years religiously. And it's not just goals, it's my ideas as well. And I break down timelines that are aggressive, but that are realistic. Okay. And that's important. There's a big difference there. I'm not going to win the Pittsburgh Marathon ever. Right. So that's unrealistic. But I'm going to put some in there that are way out there, and maybe I've got to push the timeline. So I drive off of timelines. I use my accounting background and that mentality. I'm fairly anal with it, but I physically write these down. And then I kind of break into a couple things. I look at it. I try to visualize kind of the who, what, where, when, why. And also I take into account my senses. If you take your 5 senses into account when you're goal setting, it does make it more crystallized and it gets into your subconscious. Add your timeline to it. And then 2 tips. Take the top 5 goals, whatever they are, put them on an index card, laminate them, and carry them with you all the time. And what I also do is I write my goals down every morning at 4:15. People think I'm insane, but it is no different than the old theories of Aristotle. I think he was the one who said it, or whoever all these various people have kind of repeated it. It's the same thing. If you write and think about something all day long, you kind of become what that is, right? If you keep thinking about it. So I do that every single day. I manage it through an accountability system, which I do online. Got a couple of them I use. You can use Basecamp, Base, any of the one. Trello is a good one, which is a free accountability project management. And when you're doing it every day, it focuses you not on wasting time. And we all waste time. I waste time. And it keeps a little bit more vision. And I think at the end of the day, the most important thing on any of the goal setting that I've done, and even helping other clients, and when we wrote the book on goal setting, it was to keep it simple, concise, 10 minutes a day, making yourself accountable, making it public, some of those things, but making it really short and easy to do. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes we hear goal setting and it just gets into so much depth. I have my own acronyms of what works, to keep it simple and kind of go from there. But it is a process that is learned, but it is always about the end, which is not just checking it off, but it's what happened during that time period to get to the goal. It's not just checking the box off and I did this. It's usually comes down to two things, or usually one thing. It's the people we meet along that journey to get the goal. Always, right? That's what we remember. It's like a vacation. You always remember the people. And being married to a Greek woman, we always remember something else. Food, right? It's always food, family,
people and food. Yeah,
right?
That's great. Yeah.
So I process it, but I change goals. I think it's the other thing too is goals will change. There are things that things go awry, and you refocus, and you look back in time. And I always try to do kind of a self-analysis every quarter and say, okay, how are things going? And it's not just career, finance, and family and business. It's not. I break it down into about 12 different categories. I pick like one per category and then fit the right timelines. It sounds complex, but I make it simple. That's the only way I can do it in a busy schedule.
All right, I'm taking notes furiously. So for the listener, I'm going to have all these notes. I'm going to re-listen to this before I publish it. But for the listener, I'm going to have all these notes at jimharshawjr.com/47, because Wayne just rolled off a lot of tips there, a lot of really powerful things. So Wayne, I want to go through a bunch of things here that you just said.
Okay.
Aggressive but realistic timeline, right? So you say you write in your journal every day?
Every single morning. Yep.
Every single morning. And you handwrite, not typed, handwrite.
Handwrite. I physically write. Yes.
Okay. Do you think that makes a difference over typing it?
It does. And it's interesting. And when I did some of the research on the second book, was the book Never Say I Wish I Had, which is the goals, my process. One of the things that's interesting is if you look at every Harvard study and even studies out of Cambridge in England, the retention amount and how much you learn goes up about 25% to 28% by physically writing versus typing. And it's like kids, when the kids learn, you'll retain it and you'll remember it more, and you'll be more focused when you physically do that action. So I'm a big fan of the writing.
I do a little bit of both. I do mostly typing. And the reason that I do mostly typing, because I know it's better. I've read that it's better to write them physically and handwrite them. But I like to sort my thoughts out, right? And I just dump them down into this online journal that I got, but it's searchable.
Yes.
So I can go back and search and find, I can find things, what I was talking about, because I'll just kind of sort out action plans in my head. Any thoughts on that? I mean, you're doing the same thing, but you're just flipping back through the pages and finding it, right?
Yeah, and what I do is I go back to the journal, but if there is a section in the journal that's related to ideas, and I break my journal up to books that I've read, people that I've met that were very influential over the years. So
every day you write in the same thing on like one page. You might have these, or different sections. I have it in the back.
Yeah,
gotcha.
I have it in the back of the book, and then I always have my, of course, the goals, and then I have an idea section. So what I do for the ideas, Jim, here's a thought, is then I go and I take my iPhone. I'm a big Evernote fan, so I do like meeting notes and things of that nature. If I read a book, I always follow it up with notes. Did I get anything from it? And it could be a fiction book. It doesn't have to just be nonfiction. I type up what I got from it. Was it some interesting things, context, and then I save that in Evernote. And then it's easy to search. But when I do my ideas section in the journal, I take a picture of it with my iPhone, upload it to Evernote, and then have it in Evernote. Now, it's not searchable as much, but I'll have it.
But it's in your ideas section.
Yeah, I'll put a topic so I know, hey, these were the ideas related to business, fitness, whatever it might be. So I do a little bit of both on that side, but pure journal writing I do every single day related to just goals.
And course. You must have stacks of journals.
I've got in the library now, I've got like a whole row. I've got this is year 12 of being very consistent. So I've got 12 years of journals. And what's interesting, and it's kind of fun, is go back, and I do this usually at the end of the year. I go back and I read the journals, and you see what the heck happened. And it kind of says, my goodness, I don't even remember doing this. This was amazing. So I think going back in time and seeing what's happened, and, especially you've got kids in those points that you remember what happened, right? So I do that fairly regularly at the end of the year.
Okay. Next one, you mentioned 4:15 a.m. every day you write your goals. So you're writing down your goals every day.
Every single day.
How long does that take you to actually write your goals? Is it 30 seconds? Is it 5 minutes?
Good question. It takes me about maybe 10 minutes, and it's not just the goals. It's goals and then some things that I've got to kind of accomplish for the day. I do a little bit on gratitude, things that I got to remember in my brain. But the overall thing is 4:15 to by 4:35 or so, 4:40, I'm done. 25 minutes max.
And if you didn't do that, you think you would not be as productive?
I do, because I circle, in that journal, I know my big 3 for the day. Okay, so they're not just goals, but my big 3, not tasks, things I've got to get done by the end of the day. And I always have one circled, no matter what, I got to get through one. So I kind of do that as well in the journal. But I don't think I'd be as productive if I didn't do it daily. And I guess it's just been such a process now ingrained in my brain that, again, never came out of nothing. I mean, this was just an idea that I threw out 10 years ago to my wife, and she looked at me on New Year's Day, and I talk about it in the book that she, imagine we're going to write our goals down every day of the year. I said, yeah, let's see what happens. And the results were magnified.
Does she do it as well?
She did. She, and this is for a woman who lives for food and family, right? It's the Greek world. And for me to throw out this idea that we're going to write some goals down every day of the year, you can imagine the looks. And the first year we achieved, it was incredible. And it was just because we were more focused. We achieved about 70% of the target goals, and some of them were 5-year goals, just because we kept rolling along. And not that we just focused only on it, but we just kept our mind on it. That's all.
All right. You talked about accountability. You talked about Basecamp and Trello. Are
Yes.
those, I know what Basecamp is.
Uh-huh.
Trello, is that also like a project management tool?
Yeah, and the nice thing, it is, Jim, if you haven't checked it out, take a look at it. And I would say for the audience as well, Trello is free.
I'll have a link to that for the audience as well.
Yeah, there's no fee for it, so it's a free one. And it's very, I'll say, creative. There's colors, and you just pick and move things. And it's very, very simple to use. To me, it's a great starting project management system compared to Basecamp and some of the other ones that you can use. It's not a CRM; it's just project management, but it's simple to use, and you can just move things along with your cursor, and you drop them into different buckets. And you can put it on your iPhone or your smartphone as well.
And you use this for goals?
I do for goals. I also do it for details of breaking down the goal. So if I got a big target one, and I got it, like for instance, the big race I'm doing this year, the amount of analysis and planning has been remarkable for this event. And I've put everything in Trello with trigger dates that email comes. Okay, Wayne, it's time. You got to get this thing done, or I got to get help from someone to help me to get through these next 3 things to make sure we're moving along. So I do use it for goals and then break down those goals.
You mentioned your goals will change, so I'm kind of going down through these different bullet points. So you mentioned your goals change, of course, and I emphasize that to people as well. Goals change. Just because you have it written down. Things change in your life. I think that holds a lot of people back, is because they're afraid to write their goals down, because they're like, oh man, well if I write this down, then what if something changes in my life and I can't do it? Well, it's like, write it down. Life, your life evolves, things change, situations change. How do you go about changing your goals? Do you evaluate? I think you said quarterly.
Yeah, I do. I go through and kind of see where I am on the goal, depending upon what time period it's in. If it's a 1-year goal, or if it's, then I do them short. I go 3, 6, 9, and 12, and then I go out to 5 years. And then people say, well, why do you do that? I said, well, there's planning in the future as well. I don't base everything quarter by quarter, and we can't get everything done in 1 year. But many times if I look at the quarter and say, oh my goodness, all right, something came up, I've got a new opportunity or something else, and it's point in time, I got to prioritize it. I use my own system on prioritizing. Then I will shift, and I will either shift that goal out way into the future, or I'll eliminate it. So, it's not relevant anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Right.
So I do that usually every quarter. But I mean, very often, not that often do I go and have to change that many of them. But there will be ones that will come up for sure.
You talked about 12 goals, and I've read there's different research out there that, a lot of what I've read is that 6 to 8 goals is the right number. Some say more, some say less. Mm-hmm. What you mentioned 12. What are some of those areas where you set goals, and what's your philosophy on that?
Yep. Yeah, and I think I do it in categories. So it's not so much, there could be a category that doesn't even have a goal in it. So I take 12 categories and we pick them all. I mean, I have them, I don't have them off the top of my head, but it's, family, business, finance, children, or, godchildren, give back to the community, books I want to read in a year, how many people I want to meet in a year, what new things am I going to learn for the year. So I break those down into categories, and I'll usually pick maybe one goal or none from each of those categories. But I try to do it across each one, at least have something in there. But one of the goals might be tagged out, a little bit longer time period. But right number, I think everyone's different. I hear every example possible. My average is usually I think it's about 10. I probably have 10 goals. They're not all 1 year goals, but in the 1 year goal frame, they're probably 5 to 7. Of those 5 to 7, there's 2 that are off the chart. We'll go like crazy to see if we can get them done. And then the other one's a little bit longer out. So I think it kind of depends on what the priorities are, what their key objectives are. Most importantly, it's not so much the number, but it's what's going to make life most well-rounded and how they evaluate success, because everyone has a different term of success.
Bingo.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's really important for the listener to understand. Everybody defines success differently in different areas of their life. Wayne, you write down your goals every day. Are you writing down all, say, 10 goals every day? Okay, you're writing down. And they're going to be some of them are just going to be a phrase, I imagine, or a sentence.
I write them in the fashion of I will or I have achieved them already. And I put a deadline date on there. So,
and you will say I have even if you haven't done it yet, right? You're saying to change the mentality, the mindset of it.
Yeah, it kind of drills into the subconscious a little bit. I mean, I'm not a psychology guy. I'm a finance guy. So it does work, though. It's kind of shocking.
Oh, yeah.
It does work.
Absolutely. You read the research and you talk to really, really successful people, which I only have uber successful people on this show, you being one of them. And it's just uncanny how many people tell me that they write down their goals and how they write down their goals, and talking about they have done things like that, and then fitness is another one. I mean, just so many of these habits in common, which I have the 8 habits of successful former athletes as one of my downloads for the listener. You can actually get that if you go to jimharshawjr.com/47, just 47. You'll have access to that as well. In addition to all these things that Wayne's talking about. Because, Wayne, this is unbelievable. So anything else there? So for the listener, again, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to break this all down because this is gold right here. I should charge about $100 just to listen to this episode because, Wayne, this is fantastic stuff. Anything else there on goals?
No, 2 things. One is make sure you celebrate on the back end. Enjoy the journey, I think is always important. And then I think it's always kind of nice at the end of the day to not forget what you've done. Not that you want to promote it, but just internally in your brain, and have a capture of goals you've achieved over your lifetime and going all the way back. And you say, what was that first hurdle that I got through? And as you go into, the next time period or whatever it might be, keep a section in your journal or even write on your computer. However, goals achieved. And it's kind of a nice reflection thing, and you just look at it. So I do that as well. And then key points that you've actually celebrated.
Wayne, I ask all my guests to share a time that they failed. You're obviously extremely successful in business, in athletics. You're an author, you're a speaker, you're a coach. Tell us about a time that you failed, that you faced self-doubt, and maybe even felt a sense of hopelessness that you weren't going to achieve a big goal that you'd set for yourself, and how you handled that. Because the listener, myself, we've all failed. And when we fail, it creates this seed of self-doubt. And then when we struggle in the future, it just waters that seed of self-doubt. How do you handle a situation like that? You got a specific situation you can share with us?
I do. I'll give you a good one. And trust me, I have failed plenty of times. I've had plenty of them that didn't go according to plan, as anyone else. I'm not a huge fan of the term though, Jim, failing forward all the time. It's one thing to fail, but it's not like a fun thing. It's great though to get learning lessons, but the whole mindset of this new term of failing forward, I'm not into that one as much. But I have failed, and this is a good example of one. My first job out of college was probably my best job, and it's one of those ones where there was that breaking point of not making it. And my first job out of college was I took a job that was sold to me, I think, as from the group, a lot better than it was. But it was, again, my best job I've ever had in my life. And it was door-to-door life insurance sales in lower to very low income areas in Western Pennsylvania. And what I was doing is, this was actually, you're knocking on doors and asking to individuals if they're interested in buying accidental death and dismemberment insurance policies. So the only way you get, there's a benefit, is they've got to die in an accident. So you got a $50,000 benefit for $3 a month. And the requirement was volume, as you can imagine, right? It is volume driven. So after about the first 3 weeks of this, I remember, I was a young guy, it was like a breaking point. I'm sitting in my car going home, and it's like 10 o'clock at night. And, this is like all day. And then you would try to go at night and try to get people when this other spouse would come in. And this is a different time period back in the 80s where you did this. There were points there with not just fear of failure, but just the sheer amount of rejection day in, day out, mentally was beyond tasking, to say the least. And I think what I did, and I remember this specifically, it was about, I got through the breaking point, which was you had to stay 3 months and hit your quota. And one of the things was, I have a good friend of my father's recommended a book for me to read. I always get back to books. And it was the first time I had read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends.
Yeah, great book. I recommend it all the time.
And it's such a great book. And I read it every quarter. Once a quarter, I read that book. I read it all the time. I know it's common sense, but there's ideas that are captured and that we forget about.
Yep,
and I
love
read
that book.
It's basic, but it was so true. And I would read it, and then at that time we had the cassettes. We put the cassette in the car. And it kind of started with, and there was a component of this is listening, don't ever give up for sure, and make sure that you were just generally interested in the other person, which was the whole point of that book. And it changed the way I was presenting, honestly. And I didn't have sales training or anything. It was you were thrown out to the wolves, and I turned it around. I mean, it was brutal though. I hadn't have any money, came out of college, and I'm living at home at that time. And I remember the turning point when I got on the leaderboard. And the leaderboard back there was a chalkboard, and they had lines on it. They had the 50 people in the office.
But it was on like an iPad, right? It was on
No, there's nothing. Well, this was in our office was over near Fox Chapel, which you would know.
Yeah.
In that area, Jim. And they would write down every Friday, you had to say, and we were required to sell 50 a week. So it was a lot of volume. And you got to realize the rejection factor. You're closing so low. It turned, and I got to the top of the leaderboard, and I said, that was kind of the breaking point of, I actually can do this. And it was better ways of listening and engagement for someone. But I was at the bottom. Trust me, it was lots of stress. Even at a young age, I didn't have a whole lot of things in terms of responsibilities, but I'll never forget it. And it was, that was one that was at failure, below failure, ready to get fired, turn it around, and then make it happen. So that was probably the one I remember the most.
Yeah, great story. I had a sales job at one point where it was inside sales mostly, and it was a lot of cold calling or very lukewarm calls. And I'm so glad that I had that job because, like you said, the sheer amount of rejection that you have to face and then get yourself back up for the next call, it's such a valuable lesson. I want all my kids, I got 4 kids, I want all of them to have a sales job early in their career where they're facing that rejection and they have to plow through it. And it's such a valuable thing because it allows you to become a little more emotionally tough. I think you some people have the weakness, and it's one of my weaknesses. I want to please everybody. And when you get over that, because you're ticking people off, man. They're hanging up the phone on you, and you're being persistent, and that's what a good salesperson does eventually, in doing it the right way, of course. But what a great lesson, what a great experience for me, and I'm glad you shared that, Wayne.
Yeah. Nothing like sales, right?
You've shared with us a lot of the things that I ask my guests. You gave us the book. You've told us what your one habit that you do every day, and I think we can extrapolate from that what we should be doing, what the listener should be doing on a regular basis, and what action we can take in the very near future, next 24 to 48 hours. Wayne, this was absolutely unbelievable. I'm blown away that you shared all this awesome stuff with us. I'm not even kidding. Excellent. I want you to promote the heck out of your book, your website, how we can find you, how people can hire you, and get more of what Wayne offers.
Excellent. You want the info now, or are you going to?
Yeah, lay it on me. Lay it on us now, and then I'll include all this in the action plan as well.
So just a quick update. My new website we've been working on here for a little while that has everything housed under it is Wayne-Kurtz.com. And should be launched by the end of this week. So that's hopefully by
cool.
Let's just say
by the time
end of
this
April.
Publishes, it should be good. Yeah.
Yeah. So the end of April that'll be launched. That has chiefgoalsofficer.com. So it's chiefgoalsofficer.com, which is the book, the platform. Everything is on Amazon. But if you Google Wayne Kurtz, you'll get most of the information for sure.
Fantastic stuff. So you have any other parting thoughts before we let you go, Wayne?
No, I think if anything else is one of the things I think is always a great learning lesson is those famous words for anyone when you're facing some struggles and there's challenges, that Diana Nyad quote, and I don't know if she was the one that said it, but when she did the swim, it was the day we started the Triple DECA, and her words when she got out of the water, which was, when she swam to Cuba, don't give up, don't ever give up. And those words, I think, resonate for anyone in any aspect. I mean, you can be doing any type of job, work, family. And I think, if anything, that's a good parting way for your audience. Make sure, because it does turn around.
Yep. Persistence wins. Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Wayne. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on the show. For the listener, JimHarshawJr.com/47 to get the action plan and all the other resources that I posted up on my resource page. You'll get access to as well. But this is going to be a really, really popular one, Wayne. So I appreciate you coming on. For the listener, until next time, just like when you were an athlete, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.